Hi there, I'm John and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And if you are new here, welcome. I'm John from Nigeria, and on this channel I talk about books. I do the occasional singular book reviews, book tags, book hauls, everything bookish. You can find it here. I occasionally write for a Substack called A Couple of Dorks. I'll put it in the link below. I hope to put up more full-length, essay-length review on there as the year progresses. So yeah, I am talking slightly fast because it's a very hot day. We have had subsequent hot days for a few weeks now. Yeah, I am sweating a lot. If you hear a small noise, it's a fan off to my side. I also hope this comes out nice because I'm shooting at the front of a window I do not usually use. If you are not new here, you will notice my books off to the side instead of like at my back directly. And for the OGs, I did not mean to disappear so long. Life just got in the way, and every time I thought I need to film, I think for over 30 days now, even more, I've been thinking I need to film a video, but then something always like got in the way, and I am just doing this off the cuff this afternoon and just going straight. I do not want to do many cuts, many edits, so I'm just going to rush into it. This is a recent reads, like sort of wrap-up video for things that I've read in the past few months that I did not talk about on the channel. But yes, for a small reading update, I'm currently reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Still very early on into it, so no major thoughts now. I watched the Guillermo del Toro adaptation. I did not really like it, and I hope seeing that does not affect my perception of the story. And yeah, because a friend said it would not, so fingers crossed for that. And yes, on Crime and Punishment, if anyone is wondering, I paused on that since January. I got to 50. I paused. I wanted to clear some of the small reads I had at the corner before going back fully into it. Yeah, for Slaughterhouse 5, I am done. I actually finished this month, so it took me a little over 2 months to read this I might talk about in a future video, and not this one. But yes, I'm done with it. I have thoughts. I'm not going to say anything. Nobody should ask me how I felt about it, but it might get its own separate review, or it might come in a quarter wrap-up video. I also finished my reread of one of my favorite books of all time, The Forensic Readiness. I gave it 5 stars this time. I will also talk about this in a quarter wrap-up, although I've talked about it on the channel before, but so many tabs this time, so many highlights. I don't know if you can see, but yeah, she's so dear to me, and I'm so glad that I own this physically. I also started 2 days ago, I Feel Bad About My Neck and Other Thoughts on Being a Woman by Nora Ephron. It's one of the books I got recently. There's a small wrap-up, about 10 to 15 books. Maybe I'll show it in another video as well, but yep, just 2 essays into this one. And I am rereading my favorite book of all time, Sorrow and Bliss. As you guys know, no words on this, you guys know the gist if you're not new here. But into the wrap-up, I have 7 books, sort of. I'll try to not make this too long. The first book here, I'll start with On Chesil Beach. I had a physical copy of this, but I have since gifted it to a friend who came to visit, and I needed to give him a book because he's a bookish person and a writer as well. And this I read last year in November or something. It follows a couple who have just gotten married, and we follow them on their wedding night, and we learn at the beginning of the novel that these two, they are both virgins, and so they have little experience, little idea of the world at large. And what McEwan does is examine how they have arrived at this situation where they are both virgins on their wedding night with each other, and having this sort of internal crisis about how to go about the act. We have the guy, I've forgotten his name frankly, who is anxious on his end, and we have the girl who is anxious on her end. I'm trying to remember their names, but it's so hard for me now. But what he does is explore their present, where they have gotten to through like their backstory, their history. So we get a look at where the guy comes from, his family, he's poor, comes from humble backgrounds, as opposed to the girl who comes from a very wealthy background, and we learn about their individual family histories and like the trajectory that led them to both like finally meeting each other and eventually getting married. I enjoyed it. I liked the writing, not too complex prose, and I really enjoy McEwan's voice, especially like the backstory device used here. It's a very familiar device, right? But he does play it well, and you just kind of get the gist of the novel that this is what it's going for. And so for the most part, I enjoyed it. Very simple story, very affecting at the same time, especially with how it progresses, because it moves back between past and present, the present day being the wedding, and it gets to this peak at the end, which I would say I was not expecting. And yep, I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 3.5 stars. Next, last year around the Booker Prize long shortlist time, I read 3 of them, and we'll talk about 2 today. I read Audition by Katie Kitamura, which as time has passed, I have come to think more fondly of. It is a novel split into 2 parts. It has the same central characters, and at the first part, at the beginning, we have a man who comes to meet this woman who she's sort of renowned in the theater world. She's an actress, and he tells her that he thinks he's her long lost son that she gave away for adoption. And so we see the first part of the novel giving us an insight into the woman's life and her marriage, and this young man who sort of comes to upgrade her life in a sense. And the other part of the novel imagines, or rather let's say set in a world where the reality is actually true, that this young man is the son of this woman and her husband. And it was a novel that created a lot of conversation around the time it was released for its like style and its structure and the way it's told. And a lot of people describe it as, let's say, the exploration of like what is real and what is not real. And there's a line in the book that talks about how a family is a construction or something. I'll put it up here, just paraphrasing. And I don't know, I spoke about the novel with one other person, and there's a conclusion I arrived at for myself about what Katie Kitamura was trying to do with the entirety of this story, because it's so like, it's a very, very meticulously written novel where like every single sentence like demands your attention. It's so carefully crafted. I would read and you know, the kind of thing where you try to speed yourself up, but then the novel requires, or rather the novel slows you down itself. That was what happened while I read Audition. And as it progressed, I sort of like happened upon my own conclusion for myself about how it felt like the first part is like the novel existing and the characters existing as like real people, whereas the second part felt more like a performance of a life, which is also very interesting given that the main character was an actress herself, and the boy who like plays her son, or who comes to say he's her son initially, eventually became a sort of like assistant at this theater where she worked, because she was preparing for a very, very major performance. And I really loved how Kitamura like wove in like all the talk about art and like, or really the theater like as art and like devotion to this craft. And it was written in such a way that you believe what you read, and that you believe that the character is so in love with their profession. And it's like takes a certain skill for a writer to get the characters to that point with like, because every book is like an imagined job, and to get the characters to that point where like you believe that they actually believe in this job that they do. or that they work rather. And I really found myself fascinated with it and how carefully crafted it was. And by the end, I think it won me over. It does not initially like settle, but when it gets there, I think it works for some people, it does not work for some people. More and more I have come to appreciate it more. I body read this with my friend who you guys know I body read books with, and yeah, I gave it 4 stars. Next, going on to another Booker Prize shortlist, it was The Rest of Our Lives by Benjamin Markovits. I did not like this book. I will just start there. I also body read it with the same friend, and I just found it to be a bore. I don't want to make like, I don't want to do flavorful language. It was a bore. It follows a man who is sort of having a, I don't know if to call it a midlife crisis, because his health is deteriorating, right? But then the book starts off where he tells us on the very first sentence that his wife cheated on him when their son was around 12 years old or something. I think that's how the book opens up. So it opens up with like major drama, and we get the narration of the man about this marriage, him meeting the woman, you know, all that jazz. But at the point where the novel is situated, the man's daughter is about to go off to college. Their eldest son is already very grown, so their last child is going off to college, and it's the kind of like weight, and the kind of like the way it affects like parents when they feel like they are losing their children. That's what this couple is going through, both the man and the wife, but we see mostly through the father's eyes, the man's eyes. And so we progress to where he and the wife, they eventually go off and drop the daughter at college, because it's like really the beginning of her life as you know it, and there's all the anxiety from being a parent. I'm not a parent, but you see these things every time, films and all. My own parents, my mom came to drop me in school literally with some extended family members, so you remember how that feels, and it's just all that. And then once he drops off his daughter at school, because the wife, I just remember the wife did not go along with them because she was scared of all the like saying goodbye and how heavy it was going to feel for her. And so once he eventually drops his daughter off at school, he's supposed to go back home because he drives all the way there, but he does not go back home. Instead, this is where the novel really takes off. This is where it really begins. He instead like begins to drive forward is just for different places. He makes different stops, because it's like puts to us that this marriage has been waiting to fall apart, has been waiting to crash and crumble, and the daughter finally leaving, their last child finally taking off, was the catalyst for this marriage, like finally disintegrating. But it's not really that the marriage is disintegrating, it's that he is beginning to reckon with the cheating, everything that happened, and like it's felt like they have been suspended in a sort of limbo for the entirety of when they were married together, post him finding out about her cheating, the wife, because she eventually confesses it. And I think they had this sort of agreement that nothing should be done in terms of separation until their final child leaves the house. And so that's where the novel really takes off. It has all the like elements of like a very enjoyable story, but I just found it too it's not just that it's a bore, it takes the tone of like life lessons, very life lesson here, like trying to preach to you, and the writer would insert this sort of like quotes that you know that they are trying to be quotes, and they just made my head spin every time, because at the beginning it's all like, okay, it's a middle-aged man reflecting on his life and all that, but then it just begins to be too much, where every 2 pages you have like more than 3 or 4 lines of like life lesson quotes that just felt suffocating, and that just felt like inauthentic, and it just felt like it was coming across like he tried to come across as like a wise person, as a sage person, that like the sage that comes with like age, but then it just felt so false, and I just found the writing to be like frustrating to read because of that specific tone of voice and so many other gripes I had with the writing. I read it on this phone, so I cannot go through my notes because I did take notes for it, but I gave it 2 stars. It was just a frustrating read, and even with all the like attempts to look at this life and this disintegrating marriage, like say it had meat for a story, but I just found like the products and the end results to be nothing, to be bland. And yeah, that was the rest of our lives. I also finished 2 of the short stories that I was reading in. I mentioned I started 2 short stories around June or something like that. The first one, Open Up by Thomas Murray, Sally Rooney's friend, and I read his first short story collection 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Sorry, We Don't Know What We Are Doing, set in Caerphilly. I don't know if that's how you say the name, but Wales, a small town in Wales. And he returned with this one last year, Open Up, a collection of short stories also set in Caerphilly, Wales, that explores like the daily lives, the little lives of people in the small town, and just like relationships, familiar relationships, like a lot of the existential themes that was in that novel carried to some of the characters here, looking at their own lives. The first story is this very like short, cute story about a young boy reflecting on the time he went to see a football game at like the stadium with his father. Very sweet, very touching. And we also have another story here called Arbor Karaya. I don't know if that's how you say the name, that explores like the disintegration of a family and the father taking up like the care of the children and how it affects him, but also like the way it affects the children. And it examines like this story through the lives of seahorses. It was so interesting to read about and also to learn about like seahorses, the male seahorses being the ones who carry the children. I had never heard of that before, and that's what happens in this little short story. And it's so moving, it's so touching, and it's how like he just like the whole movement of the story and the little revelations that come along as it progresses. Like he really upped his game on this one, I would say, because the last collection had more stories, whereas this one has just 5 stories, very compact, very tight. Like some, even when it was not like, let's say, a big winner, it's still a very like decent short story, and I enjoyed most of the works. Yeah, I definitely enjoyed them, and I have read his 2 books now, so I don't know, I'm definitely going to read whatever he puts out next. I'm not a big short story person, I cannot lie to you. I'm not the biggest fan of short stories, but I would say that most of them, if not all of them, 3-star and above winners, so I recommend this. But then moving to the next short story collection called Hey You Assholes by Kyle Sibel, if that's how you say the name. This was a new release from last year, and I initially liked it. Like I started out liking it. Don't get me wrong, by the end I did not dislike it, but I think I got tired of it because it's a collection of very short stories mixed with like short stories, so we can say some flash stories and regular sized short stories. So the longest story here is probably about 10, 12, maybe 20 pages at most, and it's like almost 200 pages or something like that. And why I liked it at the beginning was it had like this very, I don't want to say Holden Caulfield tone specifically, right? Because in a way I don't want to set it up in that manner, but it had some of the things that reminded me of why I liked Salinger's voice, specifically The Catcher in the Rye, since that's the only one I have read, right? But it started to feel too formulaic, which is something I noticed that happens for me or happens to me with short stories, where the form and the format and the style and the voice begins to feel too similar as the stories like move, which is something I did not see in Open Up, which is where I can say it like excelled. Like each story, you can tell it's like Murray, right? But then there was this distinctive like voice, and even in like the terms of the foundations of the story, because certain writers will repeat like their tools. It's like a toolbox, so they will repeat what they are familiar with, and I felt Sibel in Hey You Assholes relied too much on like the tool, his toolbox, so it will be like the same manner of like phrases. You'd see them occur in story after story after story, and I found them like too, in a way, too, I don't know if you say juvenile, too elementary. And although there were stories that I did enjoy, especially at the beginning, but as it progressed, it just kind of wore me out. But I gave it 3 stars at the end of the day. Nothing bad, but nothing like up there. I also finished a manga, Solanin, by Inu Asano. I talked about shortly on here sometime last year, but finally finished it. It follows 20-somethings who are trying to make it through life. You guys know those are my favorite kind of books. It's a girl who is living with her boyfriend. She quits her job because it's so monotonous, it's getting her depressed, and she decides that let her see where life takes her without a job. And you know that that can only last for a while when your income is kind of limited, because the boyfriend is a wannabe artist who is also working a corporate job that barely pays enough to support them. So it's all like the 20-something experience being examined, but also this group of young people who want to be musicians and trying to make it in that sense as well. It was not the worst thing in the world. I just could not stand the writing. Like, it felt too YA, and nothing on YA writing, but YA writing works when it's trying to be YA, or when it's like the characters at that age, not when they are 20-something year olds and they sound like teenagers. There's not too much on this. I just found it so silly, but then I enjoyed a bit of it. I gave it 2 stars, but it was not the worst thing in the world. And the last book I finished was Department of Speculation in January, first day of January. I talked a bit about this in my 2025 best of video. It was one of my favorite books. It was a reread. It's a marriage story, but also a story exploring motherhood, and so many quotes from this. I don't want to talk too much about it, but please, it's very short, so short, but also so affecting. It's told in vignettes. It's pieces and pieces and pieces and pieces and pieces that end up like giving you a full picture of before she got into the marriage and during the marriage, and like the events that take place in the marriage, but also how this child, this other human being, comes from her, and it kind of changes her life, and the concept of like a child being a real thing, and how this other being can take up your whole world. And it's all the little quotes that are big quotes at the same time. I love going back to like so many quotes from this book because they touch me endlessly. I cannot praise this small novel enough. I don't know why I did not see it the first time, but I guess that's what rereads to Department of Speculation, Jenny Offield. I have to go now. My phone is really low. It's so hot. I need to escape my house. But yes, I am sorry I've been away so long. I hope the next time I come, the whole framing and everything is better. I just wanted to go for it regardless and put something out because I miss doing this, and I hope I will not be very long away. Maybe the Slaughterhouse 5 or quarter wrap up, that will come very soon. But thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe. I miss you guys very much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.